somehow you could get that impression on deportations. Like, the whole campaign was mass deportation. They were holding up signs at the RNC that said mass deportation now. Like,
Krystal and Saagar on Breaking Points broke down a segment about Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz being confused about Donald Trump's mass deportation policies. We're going to take a look at clips of Krystal, Saagar on Breaking Points, as well as clips of Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz. I have thoughts to share on this too. Let's get into it together.
Let's go ahead and get to a big SCOTUS ruling that came out yesterday.
That's right. This is a major Supreme Court ruling that happened in the middle of a ceasefire, so you may have missed it, and you're definitely forgiven. We can go ahead and put this up there on the screen, and I'll just read a little bit from the decision. Quote, the Supreme Court has now made it easier for the Trump administration to deport convicted criminals to, quote, third countries to which they have no previous connection. In a brief, unsigned order that did not explain its reasoning, the court put on hold a federal judge's ruling that said those affected nationwide should have a meaningful opportunity to bring claims they would be at risk if they were sent to countries the administration has made deals with to receive deported immigrants. As a result, the administration will be able to quickly remove immigrants to such third countries, including South Sudan. Affected immigrants can still attempt to bring individual claims. So what you're basically seeing there is this happened, I know, while I was gone, but there was this, what was it, a deportation to South Sudan of several, I think, individuals here illegally in the United States. Well, what has now happened is that the Supreme Court is allowing the deportation of this. However, the legal process that which this is done still remains up in the air, as I understand it. It allows for such deportation to take place, but there's still open questions around due process, just like with the Alien Enemies Act. But broadly, it was a win for the Trump administration at an executive level.
No doubt about it. And it was split along partisan lines. I don't think there was much question about whether or not the administration could deport people to third countries, places they're not from. That has been, a longstanding practice. This is something that has been broadly acknowledged that, the administration has this power, whether I like it or not. The question here was all around due process. Do you have a chance to challenge that decision to send you, for example, Libya is one of the countries that they want to send people to. We've talked about Libya a lot lately because in the context of Iran, things are not going well in Libya. Reports are that, they certainly in the past had effectively slave markets. And in fact, a lot of the people who were sold on those slave markets were migrants into the country. So to me, and Saagar and I agreed we don't have time to fight about this today. So we'll table this, for a longer discussion later. To me, you should have the ability, have enough time to say, hey, I think I'm going to be tortured and murdered and sold into a slave market if I go to this country, if I'm shipped to this country, and have that go through an adjudicated process. Effectively, the Supreme Court here, and I think you may agree with this, like, not only did they say, no, you don't really deserve any sort of lengthy due process, but this is an important decision, and it really bothers me that they didn't even explain their thinking. Because that really...
I think it's a procedural thing in terms of the unsigned order, because it's like something about injunctive relief.
They could have. And the dissent was written out and explained. But the actual decision here, they give no rationale for. So it continues to leave all of these questions about why they interpreted it this way and what made them come to this decision. And I think that, I disagree with the decision outright, but I also think it's outrageous that they didn't even bother to explain what is, in effect, a quite consequential decision here ultimately. We also wanted to highlight for you guys a couple of interesting comments that I'm a little bit surprised at from Joe Rogan and then some from Andrew Schultz, where obviously, both of them were supportive of Trump in this past election. And Rogan expresses here some discomfort with the extent of the Trump deportation policy and the way they've gone about it, which, most of the people who are being detained at this point, like the overwhelming majority, I think 90%, are not violent criminals who have been picked up by the Trump administration. And so he expresses in this clip some discomfort with that. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
ICE raids are fucking nuts, man. Watching this protest on television, it's like...
Do you think the raids are nuts?
All of it's nuts.
Yeah, I think both sides are taking it a little too hard.
Well... I don't think the Trump administration, if they're running and they said, we're going to go to Home Depot and we're going to arrest all the people at Home Depot, we're going to go to construction sites and we're going to just tackle people at constructions. I don't think anybody would have signed up for that. They said, we're going to get rid of the criminals and the gang members first, right? and now we're seeing like Home Depots get raided. Like that's crazy.
Was Joe Rogan asleep during Donald Trump's first term? You know, people are talking about, well, what he campaigned on. Just look at the first term of Donald Trump. How many stories did we see where people said, oh, you know, the guy that owns the Mexican restaurant in our town, he's a really great guy. He's been here for 30 years. We didn't mean for him to get deported. We were talking about the criminals. Or, you know, my spouse and I voted for Donald Trump, and my spouse, he got deported. But he's not one of the bad guys. We thought it was going to be the criminals. Joe Rogan didn't see any of these stories that were well publicized and documented during Donald Trump's first term. I mean, anybody who, I do not believe there were people who were not on board with this who voted for Donald Trump, unless they were just completely brain dead. And you can say whatever you want about Joe Rogan, but he's not completely brain dead. He's not a Mensa member, but he's not that stupid.
Depot really struck a chord with these guys, which is kind of interesting. I guess because it's just like so known, so suburban. Joe probably maybe even has been to, because he used to live in LA, the particular Home Depot that was raided. I don't know. But I have to say, Saagar, like, on the Iran war stuff, yes, Trump said we should bomb the nuclear sites. He also said he would be the peace candidate. If you weren't paying that close of attention, I can maybe sort of give you the benefit of the doubt.
Come on.
In thinking
there was genuine ambiguity there.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
The guy literally came out and said, fuck, Israel and Iran don't know what the fuck they're doing today. And then also called for, and then said no regime change today.
Right, but I'm just saying.
You can read whatever you wanted.
Okay. You could also have looked at his first term and how hawkish he was towards Iran. But like I said, I can see where you were coming from and why you may have gotten the impression that he would not be a hawk vis-a-vis Iran. I don't know how you could get that impression on deportations. Like, the whole campaign was mass deportation. They were holding up signs at the RNC that said mass deportation now. Like, what about that made you think that this was going to be some targeted, we're only going after the criminals kind of approach? Because that was not at all what was sold during the election whatsoever. And so, listen, I'm glad to see him express concern, but I just think it's insane that you didn't think that was the direction that Stephen Miller was going to go, and Tom Homan were going to go in if they were put back into power.
I mean, look, I don't disagree. I mean, the mass deportation was about as clear as it was. I think it was mass deportation in the trade war. I guess it's about implementation or seeing like there's something visceral probably about it. I mean, I don't know, because it is one of those things where, look, sometimes people believe in something, but they don't necessarily understand like what the overall implication of what it's going to play out is going to look like. I mean, that's understandable, I guess. So there hasn't really been a serious mass deportation effort like this in literally, 50 years or something like that. So, you know, to that extent, that makes sense. But yeah, broadly, I mean, I would say in particular with like MAGA and, you know, what they were saying literally at the time and also in terms of practice, there has not really been a single thing. I would maybe CCOT. I would say the rest of it has not personally surprised me. Like Home Depot.
CCOT surprised me.
No, but that's what I'm saying. CCOT, but even he said he was going to do the Alien Enemies Act literally on the campaign trail. I think 70 days before he came 70 days before he was elected, he's like, here's my plan to use the Alien Enemies Act and to immediately expedite deportation. Again, you could sympathize because people are not paying attention, but at a like mass deportation level, they made it pretty clear. I mean, yes, they were talking about criminal and illegal, but you know, a large part of it here was about labor and cheap labor specifically. That's been a central point of the Trump talking points on immigration now for quite some time. But I guess people sometimes maybe see what they want to see as well.
And it's pretty scary that Krystal Ball, you know, as critical as she and her husband, Kyle Kulinski, are of the Trump administration, and as much as they sound the alarm, Krystal and Kyle do, over the threats and the dangers of the Trump administration, for the fact that even she didn't know quite the lengths that they were going to go to, that's pretty scary. And Saagar, I think, is right about that there weren't a lot of surprises here. But again, you know, we have Charlie Kirk and some others saying there should be no immigration from third world countries at all, legal or illegal. So I just don't believe, I think a whole lot of MAGA, just regular rank and file voters, think this is great. They don't want there to be foreigners here. Now, none of them are actually sitting down and doing the math and saying, gee, if, you know, people get deported in my town, then some of my favorite restaurants might go out of business. I know just in the small town that I live in where there's a ton of Mexican restaurants, there's a Mexican restaurant that is popular here. And everybody that I talk to says whenever they go, there's different people working there. And they basically can't speak English. And I'm sure that's because the people are scared. I don't know that they've actually been rounded up in the town that I live in, but I'm sure the people are scared and they just don't show up for work. So they're having a lot of turnover. That just makes sense. But I just don't believe that Joe Rogan, I don't know who this guy was on his show, but that Joe Rogan knew nothing about this. He really thought that the plan was only to get rid of the criminals and not to get rid of basically everybody. I mean, what was it they were talking about, deporting 10 million people? There's not 10 million people here who are criminals. Now, the MAGA people say over and over again, well, just because somebody crossed the border, they're a criminal. But I don't think any rational person looks at it that way. But what do you think about this? Do you agree with what Saagar and Krystal Ball had to say here about Joe Rogan? I didn't get to the Andrew Schultz part. I might do another video about that. But and do you believe, is Joe Rogan this naive or this dumb that he really thought that they wouldn't be rounding up people at Home Depot, that it would just be the quote unquote criminals? Let me know what you think in the comments about all this. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.